More on the Gaza-Israel conflict. We turn to Paul Salem. He's the president of the Middle East Institute. Paul, thanks for joining us. Now, what do you say to Netanyahu's warning that this war will not just be difficult but also long? Can the Middle East handle it?
Well, indeed, this will be a war that's likely measured in months. We've seen that the Israelis have opted not for an attempt at a large-scale rapid invasion, but rather a long siege plus repeated incursions. I think this has a number of reasons. One is that it is very difficult to undertake anything larger and more sweeping. Hamas is dug in. Hamas is prepared for such an onslaught, so they're choosing a much more careful approach. Secondly, they have over 200 hostages with Hamas, and any large-scale invasion would put those lives at risk and would put the negotiations to release them would end those. Thirdly, they are trying to avoid an escalation from the Lebanese front, from Hezbollah, and any large-scale operation, larger than what they're already doing, would trigger that. So I think we are in for a very, very long war, measured definitely in months, hopefully not years.
Could you just clarify what you mean about Hezbollah there? You're saying that a large, more protracted invasion will deter Hezbollah and Iran from getting involved? Is that what you just said?
No, I'm saying that if, sort of the reverse, if Israel were to launch a sort of one massive, full-scale ground invasion to try to take, rapidly all of Gaza, that would trigger probably the opening of a second front with encouragement from Iran to get Hezbollah to open a second front. So I think that's partly behind this step-by-step approach, but it's still completely punishing to the civilian population that's stuck there.
That's interesting, because I was interested in how this might affect Iran's goal in this conflict. But just sidestepping that for a moment, obviously this ground invasion has always been in the works, in the plan. Israel has been heeding warnings from international bodies. What's your assessment in terms of assessment of Israel's disinterest in these accusations the UN has made about Israel breaking international law and that it's investigating war crimes on both sides? Is Israel being shielded or immunized in a way that, is able to undermine international law? And what's the danger of that, if so?
Well, I mean, one has to begin by saying that what Hamas did on October 7, breaks any rules of anything. International law, it was an act of terror targeting civilians for sure. But the Israeli reaction as well, clearly, even by supporters of Israel like the U.S., a lot of what they're doing violates international law. The suspension of fuel, water, energy supplies to 2.3 million people is against international law. The large-scale, they say it's not targeting of civilians, but the way things are being targeted, entire city blocks and buildings and so on, and the death of already 3,000 children, certainly that is not careful warfare by any means. I think from some Israeli side, they feel that their civilians were attacked in a kind of collective punishment by Hamas, and Israel is responding with collective punishment on Palestinian civilians, both of them major violations of international law.
But what's the true goal for Israel here, given that, to obliterate and wipe Hamas off the map is perhaps impossible? They can absorb themselves in new communities, they can re-establish themselves in a different way down the line. I mean, what does Israel really want at the end of all this, and what can it achieve?
Well, I do think there's a lot of bickering among Israeli political and military leaders, or different points of view. They're certainly in a state of shock after the attacks of October 7. It's clear that what their highest ambition would be is what they've declared, to utterly defeat and destroy Hamas. But as you said, that's limited by what they can actually achieve. That is a very, very tall order. I wouldn't say necessarily it's impossible, but it might be extremely difficult. Secondly, it comes at a very high cost, first of all, on Israeli lives, because if they attempt to do that, it will be a very difficult fight. Secondly, it will come with many, many more thousands of Palestinians killed, and that will put international and regional pressure on them. Thirdly, it puts the lives of the hostages definitely at risk. So I think they have, a complex road ahead of them. And while they have, the highest ambition is what they declare, they're probably going to, at some point, have to negotiate and settle for some middle-of-the-road solution.
I was listening to an interview earlier with an Israeli official, and he was talking about Gaza in a new way, that the people of Gaza could come back and enjoy their life again with a whole new government. What would that government look like? Would Israel be part of that government? Is this an opportunity for Israel to absorb Gaza into its own territory?
Well, it depends how much of Gaza Israel is able to occupy again. As we've said, maybe their ambition is to reoccupy the entire Gaza Strip. That might be very difficult and might take very long. They might be able, certainly, to capture part of the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip might end up being divided into two Gazas. And then the Gaza that they occupy, they are likely to turn to other forces, perhaps the Palestinian Authority, maybe with support from the international community, to help create a sort of under Israeli occupation, a different type of government that might be similar to the situation under occupation of the West Bank.
All right, Paul, really interesting. Great to get your insight. Thank you very much for your time. Paul Salem there, President of the Middle East Institute.